Hello, and welcome to ASG Technology's presentation, DevOps, Mainframes, and Culture Change, Removing Barriers to Successful Transformation. My name is Anna Murray, and I'm Director of Product Management at ASG Technologies. At ASG Technologies, I manage our workflow automation and value stream management platforms, as well as our JCL Management solutions. I've been working in the IT industry for a couple of decades now, and in all honesty, I started around the 2000s when the mainframe was dying. But to be truthful, there were mainframes in every shop that I have worked in, and it has been relevant all along the way. My experience has taken me into the field for installations and training of automation software, as well as through the development cycle with documentation and quality assurance and customer care, business analysis, project management, finally into product management, where I have found my place that I really excel. Our agenda today is going to cover the following things. The relevance of the mainframe, which I think you all are going to know about, but it's worth covering. DevOps in the mainframe world. What are the challenges that are being faced and what are other people doing about it? And we will touch on briefly, why is DevOps so important? Why this topic, right? And you're all here at this DevOps Mainframe Summit. Hopefully you know again, but it's worth getting into and exposing the truth, right? And then how are other organizations transitioning into DevOps? How are they successfully or unsuccessfully going about this? And then we'll talk about some DevOps in the real world and some real solutions you can use to help empower you. So let's talk about a little bit of history. In the 1960s, mainframes filled whole rooms and they required stacks of punch cards to run programs, right? Many of you remember this. And it was a very interesting time, and people were learning so much at that time. And honestly, when people think about mainframes, I think many people still think about these systems from the 1960s, and they truly were dinosaurs if you look at them from today. But they were only the beginning of an evolution. By the 1980s, we were able to move on from punch cards to green screen terminals, which really was a great advance in the mainframe. It removed a lot of the human error involved in transporting the punch cards around. God forbid you dropped your stack of punch cards. So when you think about the advance that comes with moving to a terminal, it was a major step forward. And, you know, when you think 20 years later, this is in the 2020s, the mainframes are sleek and they are they're about the size of a refrigerator and they fit right inside your data center next to other stacks of servers. They are incredibly fast at transaction processing. And by some, they are still considered the most reliable processing platforms. When I'm talking to people about mainframes and they either snicker and think about them as dinosaurs, I like to compare it to a car. When you think about the Model T, that was one of the original cars, and it's fun to watch people drive around in them if they still have them working today. But compared to, say, a self-driving Tesla, that Model T is a dinosaur, right? But they're both cars. They both do transportation, but they are vastly different technologies, right? The same thing has happened with the mainframe. And I like to encourage people to think about the evolution of the mainframe and how powerful it is today. So let's talk about that a little bit more. The truth about mainframes is that while these numbers are from 2017, they're still fairly accurate, right? But 92 of the top banks are running mainframes. And 6 of the 10 largest retailers are running mainframes, 10 of the largest insurers, 23 of the 25 largest airlines. These all still use mainframes. And think about this. 87% of all credit card transactions and nearly 8 trillion payments every year are processed by mainframes. The world is largely still dependent on mainframes. Before 2020, there were 4 billion passenger flights processed every year by mainframes. I assume that as travel resumes, that number is just going to go up. The other thing to mention here is that the number of installed MIPS, and that's the power of the mainframe, keeps going up. So people are buying more processing power and it's continuing to increase over time. So contrary to what we thought in the 2000s when the mainframe is dying, no, it is alive and well. I found this really interesting too. Last January, there was a great blog from a company called Precisely. And they highlighted that there's 18,625 companies still using mainframes. Wow. But what's really cool is they said that more than 70% of Fortune 500 companies are using mainframes for their most crucial business processes. And you all know why. It's because that transaction processing is so fast, right? Not only that, that means it's a great platform for blockchain processing as well as machine learning. So when I'm talking to folks about how modern the mainframe is, how modern is talking about blockchain, right? Machine learning. These are cutting edge things that we're working on in the IT industry, and the mainframe is the best platform to do that processing. All right, so enough about praising the mainframe. What about mainframe programmers, right? These original programmers were explorers. And I want to bring up this side by side of Grace Hopper. You all probably know, but she was critical in the development of the still strong and living language of COBOL. She was a pioneer, right? I have a lot of respect for this woman. And she was one of many, though, that pioneered the mainframe. They were explorers, and they learned so much and brought us a long way in the IT industry. Today, there's people from all over the world of all working ages that are mainframe programmers. In fact, recently I heard from Wolfram Grease of the Mainframe Academy, and he has educated hundreds of young people over the last 20 years to be mainframers. So we also know that Cameron Say is here in the United States, and he educates mainframe programmers. We have been educating them over the last decades, right? And they are coming into the fold. We have had some struggles with some companies looking for experienced mainframe programmers. Well, that's where we start getting into some of the challenges in the DevOps initiatives in the mainframe world, right? The experienced mainframe programmers, many are retiring. Frankly, many of them want to go spend time with their grandchildren, right? So we have to be hiring those younger programmers. And honestly, they look for a different experience. They're not satisfied with the green screen anymore, mostly. And they're looking for a consistent user experience across applications. And they may not just be programming in COBOL on the mainframe, they may also be doing Java, right? And they can do that from a single interface given the right tooling. The other challenge is kind of related, the DevOps and Agile environments, right? Really, Agile and DevOps go together. And Agile didn't begin on the mainframe, right? Mainframe programming was working. It was flowing just fine as far as everybody on the mainframe was concerned. And in the open systems world, we started doing the Agile development practices and adopting DevOps to support those Agile development processes. And it slowly started moving into the mainframe space because as people realized the benefits of DevOps, they were saying that it had to translate into the mainframe. We have to bring the processing over to the mainframe for the DevOps processes so that we get the same benefits out of our mainframe applications that are coming across. And what's interesting to me is there's still this very strong cultural pushback from the mainframe. And last year, I participated in a joint webinar with Paul Casson at CompuWare, and we asked a survey question. We said, what are your biggest concerns with your mainframe development? And what wasn't surprising was about 40% of the responses had to do with cultural struggle within the mainframe organizations. One of the answers, I grabbed the quote because it was frankly rather shocking to me, but the answer was, our enterprise architecture group doesn't think that mainframe development can do DevOps. And really that struck me very strongly with, why would they say that, right? I push back against anyone who says they can't do it when it comes to technology. Honestly, most of the time that just comes back to how much it costs us to do something. it just hasn't been done yet. And you need to have an open mind, right, to change. So I think that's where I want to move into the next stage of this conversation is why aren't people wanting to change? And fear is maybe a strong term, but it's common knowledge that we all fear the unknown, right? We do fear change because there's unknown built into that, right? And we're maybe not so much afraid of the uncomfortable as we just don't want to mess with the uncomfortable anymore, right? In my career, I've been an agent of change. I always look for places for growth and push for different things to happen. In fact, in my previous company, I helped them with an agile transformation from waterfall. And as I have grown through my career, I have thought I'm pretty good at change. What's really funny is in my personal life, a few years ago, my husband said, "Hey, how about we go learn to sail?" And I was instantly afraid. And I told him, "I don't know. I'm afraid of sailing." And he said, "Why?" And he didn't laugh at me. He was very respectful. And I said, "Well, I'm afraid of it because I'm not a very good swimmer." And he looked at me in the eye and he said, "Dear, if we're sailing, we won't be in the water swimming. We will be on the boat." And it's very simple, but it's interesting how when we think about change, sometimes our brains go off into the side, right? And all I needed to do was get some education. I needed to learn about sailing. And so you know what? We went and we got certified. We got 2 or 3 certifications in sailing, did man overboard exercises to make sure that someone does go in the water, we can rescue them. And ultimately, sailing has been one of the most exhilarating things that I've done in my life. And so when we think about fear of change and fear of doing something different, we could really be missing out on something wonderful. This leads me to a quote from Adrian Cockcroft. He's currently VP of Cloud Architecture and Strategy at AWS. But when he was at Netflix, he said this and gave us this quote: "Do painful things more frequently so you can make them less painful." DevOps falls directly into that category, in my opinion. So this is an MIT Sloan Management Review in 2016. And what was interesting and probably very helpful going into 2020 was that 90% of these respondents anticipated that their industries would be moderately disrupted by digital trends, right? There was more than just a moderate disruption when it came to 2020. But 44% of those people said their organizations were adequately preparing. And honestly, as we looked at the industry going through the pandemic in 2020, many companies were able to pivot and they were able to move forward. So the other part of this said that 80% of respondents from digitally maturing companies were actively engaging in bolstering their efforts for risk-taking and agility and collaboration. Well, that all leads into DevOps, right? DevOps is so important because of the agility. It's important to be able to face disruption, to be able to pivot if you're a development organization. So what are the benefits of DevOps? Well, it's tied right in with your agile practices, right? You have shorter feedback loops between your departments. So DevOps enables the distribution more quickly of your code. So you've written the code, and you need to promote it into QA, or QA needs to promote it into production. There are environments and references all over the place that have to change when you move into different environments. And so DevOps enables that to happen quickly and automatically so that you can shorten the feedback loop. And that does mean you can deliver your software more quickly. You can also increase quality because you're getting that feedback loop, right? When you catch a problem inside, you can fix it more quickly and less expensively. Let me say that again. If you catch a problem internally, you can fix it quickly and it's much less expensive to fix. And ultimately, you're creating features that users actually need. If you're doing the review cycles that involve customer feedback, they can let you know what's great about what you're doing and what you might need to tweak to make sure that it's exactly what they need. DevOps is the technology underlying your agile practices that help automate it and make it happen more quickly. Okay, so how are some other organizations doing with this agile transformation? 91% of app dev professionals surveyed leverage DevOps. But what's interesting is that only 34% of them leverage it across the enterprise. That means that the mainframe is being largely left out. You see that some say they're using it for mobile and user apps, others for distributed systems only, and 9% don't even know if they are leveraging it. So there is an opportunity for growth, right? And many mainframe companies or companies that are using mainframes that we talk to are still struggling with this. But you've got to start somewhere. And I have worked with companies that the change to DevOps and agility started from the bottom up, and people within the development organizations and the operations organizations tried to make the change happen. And they did. They evangelized and they moved the process all the way up to the CEO, who ultimately looked at it, and it was a great sales pitch. And that CEO said, "Sure, sounds great. Go for it." Right? But ultimately, that company really has struggled, and it's been a slow process for them to fully adopt DevOps because they didn't have buy-in from the CEO. He was okay with it, but he wasn't pushing it. Another company I worked with had a new CEO come in, and he looked at what they were doing and decided they really need to make a shift. They needed to go agile, they needed to use DevOps, and they needed to be releasing every 3 months. So he pushed out education to everyone and set a deadline for them to switch. And I think the term they used was burn the boats. They were not looking back. And that CEO was right behind it. He said, "We are doing this and we're going to succeed." But not only that, we know we're going to fail a little bit along the way, right? And this brings me to thinking about Gene Kim's book, The Unicorn Project, where he talks about the 5 ideals of DevOps. Those ideals are focus, flow and joy, improvement of daily work, psychological safety, and customer focus. The psychological safety is very interesting to me because it is making a place where it's okay to fail. It's safe to fail. In fact, a term that's I hear a lot now is fail fast, right? If we fail fast, we learn fast. And you have to have a space that is safe to fail. And I think traditionally, mainframe programmers are in a space where maybe it's not safe to fail. And we need to make an environment that is safe for them and help them come along with us. And part of that exploration and growing, and part of growth is always failing. And so you need to feel like you're not going to lose your job if you make a mistake, right? You make a mistake, you learn from it, and you make changes to make it better. Here's an example of a customer we have worked with, and it is a major credit card processor, and it is a huge environment. They have decided they're embracing DevOps, and part of that process is that they are standardizing on the CompuWare Topaz Workbench. And we have a JCL Management solution that has an Eclipse plugin, so it plays directly with CompuWare Topaz Workbench. And this is helping them to have their more experienced mainframe programmers adopt CompuWare Topaz Workbench. Before, when they first started using Topaz, those developers were asking, how do I scan my JCL? That was their first questions because they're working on JCL every day. And so we brought in ASG Pro JCL and the Topaz and the Eclipse plugin, and it closed a gap in their DevOps mainframe tooling. And this is helping them move forward. Pro JCL also comes with a RESTful API so that they can automate that with their Jenkins pipeline. This was another goal in their DevOps process. When we talk about Jenkins, now we're talking about another tool. I've said Eclipse and Topaz and Jenkins. The DevOps architecture is complicated. There are lots of tools in that pipeline, and there are lots of dots to connect. It is complex. And some things that we need are tools inside that pipeline to be able to automate pieces. And we also need a way to orchestrate the whole thing so we can see what's going from end to end in our value streams. I'm going to take a quick look at a JCL management lifecycle situation. So when we talk about complexity, when you start making changes in your JCL, of course, you're starting from production. But as you pull that back into development, there's transformations that have to happen and standards that are put in place for development to do their work. Validation that all of the variables are pointing to the right places, right? So they do their work. Then it has to be promoted into QA. Well, the member names are different and logins are different. Everything has to be transformed to work in a QA environment. And there may be a user acceptance testing. There may be a user acceptance testing environment as well. And the same process has to happen over again. And so at each step of the way, it needs to be automated so that everything flows through the process. I mentioned that our JCL Management solution has an Eclipse plugin. Just to make that a little more clear, Eclipse is a very popular open source Java integrated development environment. And its popularity is because it's virtually unlimited customization. It's so popular that companies like CompuWare and IBM have built solutions based on that Eclipse standard. What we did with ASG Pro JCL is build a plugin that works with any of these. So we have customers that are running Topaz, some that are running IDZ, and others that are looking at using a vanilla Eclipse environment. Our product works in any of those environments. And what's really important about all of this is that our strong traditional mainframe JCL management solution runs on the mainframe, but it comes with a RESTful web service. So our Eclipse plugin talks to that RESTful web service so that we can run scans and take care of all of those details. And we have a single interface then from which developers can scan in the Eclipse plugin, right? But you can then also plug in through the RESTful web services through something like Jenkins, like I already mentioned. But there's TeamCity and Circle CI, and we have ASG Enterprise Orchestrator that can also connect with that RESTful web service and help orchestrate things from end to end. So when we talk about a value stream, what are we talking about? That's a term I've started throwing in. It is a new term that Gartner is talking about a lot. And in the mainframe space, we haven't been thinking about value streams that much, but ASG is. And we want to tell you that we have solutions that can help you from mainframe to cloud, right? So when we think about that mainframe value stream, it always starts from a user, and I have another view of this. But when you look about flattening out the value stream, the value is to your end customer, right? So your customer needs something, you need to create it, you need to deliver it. There's a lot of steps in that chain, right? And so we want to automate each of those pieces to make it flow more quickly. And I keep coming to that. So here's another view of that, and it steps you through the process. And we can be from the cloud into a mainframe, back to other on-prem solutions like Jenkins and Chef and Puppet to automatically configure things, and back out to delivery where we can monitor and go to the next step. So we're out of time together today, but I want to come back to this statement. As Adrian so eloquently put it, if we do things more frequently, it can make it less painful. And I would actually venture to say that DevOps can become a joy when you get it right. So you can go from painful to less painful, as Adrian puts it, to joyful. Thank you for your time today. I've enjoyed speaking with you.